back to Godless Reads, the Chilling Tales for Dark Night show where different godless authors read their own work. This is episode 18 of the big show, and we all know that 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. 666. And today is June 6th. So it would only make sense that today, June 6th, that we would have the 666 awards on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights right after this episode. God! And since there is so much serendipity going on around today's date, I'm reading Godless Reads tonight. So tonight on Godless Reads, enjoy Nazareth by author Drew Stepek. The short story Nazareth is the first piece of fiction that I ever had published. It was originally published in 1998 in a book by Joe Firmage called The Truth. Nazareth eventually went on to become a novel, and that novel was called Godless. And that novel, Godless, came out on June 6th, 2006. And of course, to support this novel, I bought the domain godless.com, which went on to be the platform that we're all promoting and talking about right now with Godless Reads. So, to support and help promote these independent horror authors, we started a thing last year called the 666 Awards. Tonight is the second annual 666 Awards, and this year it's being distributed on Chilling Tales for Dark Night. Go figure! So Godless isn't about Satanism? What the whoa? So since I'm the featured author this week, feel free to fucking troll me all you want. Call me an old man, used car salesman, piece of shit, 90s loser. I don't give a fuck. I got thick fucking skin, man. Trigger warning. Nazareth is not a horror story. So there's another reason to piss in my fucking face. Well, now that you've got all that ammunition, don't waste your time making fun of my big ass nose, or me being a used car salesman, or me being a fucking fossil, or having fucking bulimia teeth. Really dig into me, man. I fucking love it. Be sure and stay tuned in on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights for the 666 Awards. We got tons of special guests. It's hosted by myself, Christina Pfeiffer, and Rachel Schomer. Check it out, man. We're honoring what we think are the best horror authors in the world, and we want you to agree. As always, kick back, grab your drug of choice, and let me give you a pound of my flesh with my story Nazareth. Nazareth. Nazareth by Drew Stepek. They said with one accord that I got drunk oftener than was necessary, and that I was a wild and godless, idle lecherous, and a disconnected, unsettled rover. Samuel Langhorne Clemens. 1. Some things are best left unsaid. You go to school with my stepdaughter, don't you, boy? It was difficult to hear Rick Conroy, the owner of Auto RX, over the cranking of ratchets and humming of nut drills. He was talking about my friend Laurie Conroy. He wiped grease and piss off his forearm and started writing up my paperwork. Not realizing it, he licked his pen and got a glob of ink all over the side of his blistered lips. Conroy's skinny frame hunched over, the grease dripped from his face. Yeah, I know her. I thought so. I've seen you around her all the time. What's your name? Deese? My name's Dee. Laurie and I hang out. He didn't answer, so I kept talking. I've known her since you all moved here when I was in grade school. Trying to take attention away from Conroy's lazy eye, I looked up the clock behind him, which a bikini-clad model was holding a mug that said, "Time for a beer." The model's non-existent head was the clock's face. I attempted to speed the conversation along, as his eye was making me uncomfortable and my shoes were swimming in crusty rags. My friend Freddie Brubaker would be waiting for me at the high school homecoming game in a few hours. So what's the damage, Mr. Conroy? A huge thud rang out in the garage area. Deteriorated plaster and dust snowed from the ceiling, and a makeshift shelf of die-cast racing cars behind the registered collapsed. "Oh shit!" I screamed, hoping the disaster didn't involve my car. Conroy spun around. "What the hell's going on back there?" "Nothing, boss. Just dropped a fender," came a voice from the garage. "Be more careful, you fucking invalids." Mr. Conroy turned back to me and slapped me on the shoulder. "There goes your car." He laughed, but it wasn't a warm or mirthful sound. "Just jokes, boy." Hilarious. I looked down at my watch. It seemed like a safer place than trying to choose which one of Conroy's eyes to make contact with. I tried to look at his sleeves optional t-shirt that said Muff Diver across the front, but I could feel the wandering eye hovering. So yeah, what do I owe you? Conroy drummed the pen a few times in the paperwork and tapped away at his calculator. Then he ran his blackened hands through his hair plugs. He tore out the receipt and looked at it. Defeated, he chucked his first estimate by the trash, the cemetery of all his mathematic mistakes over the past year. Crumbled up paper littered the corner of the register. You ever poker? Huh? You ever poke Lori? I know all you kids are fucking. A year earlier, I would have jumped at the chance to have sex with Lori. She had it all. Big full lips, dirty little eyes, and a slight gap between her two front teeth. However, something was wrong with her, and the distance that she was keeping from her close friends was reflected in the 30 pounds she had dropped over the summer. He paused and smirked. Come on, son. You can tell me. She ain't mine by blood. I sighed and closed my eyes for a second. Can you please just give me my bill so I can pay it? Jesus Christ, Mr. Conroy. All I had done was the oil. Lunging forward, he snatched me up by the collar. I turned my head. Don't you take the Lord's name in vain, boy. If I found out you're fucking my daughter, I'll beat your sack through your throat. He put his fist under my chin. I didn't answer. I just looked at him with cold eyes, waiting. Don't get smart. What's the matter? Your daddy get canned from the mill like all those other poor bastards? Our time's tough? Not for me, you little prick. Even your poor ass has to get around somehow. Relax, I'm not having sex with your stepdaughter. I shook away his grip. I just need my car so I can go to the homecoming game. Shaking his head, he retracted whatever thought passed through his mind. Homecoming game. Yeah, right. They ain't never gonna win nothing in this town. He strutted back to the garage, flipping the pen backward that left an ink-stained money shot in his mouth. Jose, get your ass up here and do this little shit's paperwork. I thought my town was shit, and my conversation with Rick Conroy at Auto RX backed me up. It was poor and dying. If I stayed there, I'd most likely die too. I wanted out so bad that I met my mailman every day after school, anticipating any college acceptance letter. Every day. I paid Jose and he drove my car around for me. Have a good time at the homecoming game. Go Badgers. Here you go, Jose. I gave him a couple of bucks for his trouble and got in my car. Go fucking Badgers. The smell of oil still burned in my engine, making me sick. That fucker Conroy hadn't done shit to my car. The smell inside, though, was better than the stench I would suck in by rolling down my windows. The paper mill upwind shut down about 9 months before, leaving most of our town, including my workaholic father, unemployed. Its closing, however, didn't rid the area of the pulp-burning stench, punctuated by the odor of dead animals. The combination smelled something like the aftermath of a bombed sweatshop. Most of the wildlife was killed drinking the foulness that filled the water. I stumbled on carcasses frequently. In one respect, though, I guess I could thank the paper mill. It gave me the resources to fill out the paperwork necessary for a scholarship. I'm not an environmentalist, so some 40-odd years of toxins from the mill didn't seem to affect or bother me nearly as much as their absence had destroyed the town and its people. As I drove through the town, I observed its decline. You'd think on homecoming weekend there would be banners and signs welcoming home the alumni. But not in my town. There are two kinds of alumni, those who never left and those who never wanted to come back. I wanted to be one of the latter. I drove by a few storefronts that were still in business. The wooden signs hung on by one nail, and the burned-out neon signs were indecipherable. The only store that still had a good neon sign intact was Rick Conroy's Auto RX. Get in check, it boomed in my rearview mirror. Get Auto RX. Over the summer, Lori and I used to break into her stepfather's garage and drink. Every time before we left, we'd cut the circuit breaker and shut down the pulsating sign. We figured we were doing the town a favor. No store stayed open after 5. I mean, what was the use? Nobody had any money to buy anything. Most of the stoplights were malfunctioning in the center of town, but I always stopped, whether they were working or not. At a flashing red light, I saw the town barber, Remy Wolf, sharing a 40 with a loiterer. Hey, D, he waved, jogging next to my car. Need a haircut? I held my breath and rolled down my window. Sorry, I'm a hippie this year, Mr. Wolf. I nodded back at his companion. I think he might want to cut your buddy off. The barber turned around to see his loiterer dropping a deuce in the alley next to the shop. The bum's uncircumcised cock dribbled into a pile of trash. Wolf ran back to the shop and started chasing his pal down the alley with a broom. Shit steamed down the man's legs as he scrambled to pull up his pants. Driving by the homes proved even more depressing than driving through the center of town. Rather than having a space between them, they were all sewn together by discarded appliances and the rest of the shit in the yards. I stopped at one of the homes. I knew my mom was looking for a filter for her dryer, and I actually saw a dryer that looked like ours. A woman came to the door with a baby attached to her tit. "Yeah?" she coughed. "Can I look at your dryer?" I said, averting my eyes from her boobs. My mom was looking for a filter. "Got a good look, kid?" I must not have looked away quickly enough. "Sorry, I wanted to know about the dryer." The door slammed shut. It turned out to be the wrong model anyway. "Thanks, wrong dryer. I don't need any milk." Too busy being a smartass, I got tangled in the boob lady's fence. Wrapping and covering almost every other inch of the town was the virus vine. In our part of the town, people called the uncontrollable kudzu weed the virus vine. Kudzu spread, covered, and swallowed our town, eliminating it and all of its value from the face of the earth. It grew on houses. It grew on phone lines. If you left your car unattended for too long, it grew on your car. Maybe the town was best that way. Unseen, unsaid, and unnoticed. When I got home, I met my pal the mailman. Nothing. No ticket out. Once again. Then I changed out of the shirt that Rick Conroy stained with oil when he threatened to knock my nuts through my throat. Looking a little better, I left the house. I had to make my afternoon stop at Nazareth. You see, I discovered a way to cleanse myself of the confines of prom dates, football pep rallies, and lame tri-screen enhanced motivational speeches in an auditorium. The latter interested me the least. Although the intention seemed honorable, these presentations were always emceed by some hack ex-cop, who had evidently honed in on his audio-visual skills rather than his filling out retirement paperwork skills. Besides, I didn't believe these drink, drive, die speeches were what George Lucas envisioned when he created THX. Instead of indulging in the lackluster rah-rah of high school life, I chose to pay my respects to a tree. Paying my respects to a tree wasn't slang for getting high or anything like that. The tree offered me a place where I could write, think, and be alone. The tree stood at the center of my nirvana. I never understood how it grew in the tainted soil of my town. Standing about 30 feet, the tree, which I jokingly dubbed Nazareth, nestled in the side of a bog bank contaminated by the atrocities of the paper mill. Quite a persistent old bastard, the tree had been there for as long as I could remember. It had 2 extended limbs that sprouted out, reaching eternally for some sort of hope. The shaft displayed the agony of a martyr's face, twisted, torn, and weathered. Brought to the tree by the moisture from the venomous swamp were thousands of gnats and marsh bugs that sucked at its tears of sap. Although the oak was a landmark, its beauty never stopped me from baptizing after a good night of writing and having a few too many beers. When I was about 5, this scumbag neighborhood kid Tommy Horton took a piss on me when we were out catching toads by the mill. I guess pissing on Nazareth was my revenge. The base was so thick and soundly embedded into the ground that even the swampy muck that sucked the life out of most of the seedlings was pissed back down into the bog. "Hey, fucker." I tapped at the base of Nazareth and sat down to write about my confrontation with Rick Conroy before I went to the game. To avoid having to change my clothes again, I brought a bleacher seat with me every time I visited Nazareth. It was better than walking around with sludge on my ass and having to explain that I didn't shit myself. Usually I sat with my back against a tree. This method produced the best results for writing. Sometimes, though, I sat in front, admiring it. These writings usually turned out to be kind of pussy. I never brought anyone to the tree, except for that one time when Lori and I had been out throwing apples at cars. We accidentally nailed a cop car and needed a place to hide. Since we didn't want to risk breaking and entering into the Auto RX, I took her to my place. She wasn't so skinny then. 2. The wind that homecoming night smelled like burnt embers as it breezed through town, fighting away the always lurking stench of the old paper mill. The fall of my last year of high school wasn't an Indian summer. Quite the contrary, the weather was bitterly cold. That night, our team delighted us with the homecoming football game. The cheerleaders were so cold that not even their team spirit and mascot-blessed sweaters could help them avoid the crowd heckling them. The home team fans were no better off because the seating was scarce. In the center of the bleachers was a giant hole that we called the shit pit. During the final game of the previous season, some idiot kid doused the termite-infested seating with kerosene before the game and lit it on fire. I think he played on the golf team and had decided to protest the sale of our local golf course to a waste disposal company. Outside the field, I met up with Freddie Brubaker, bundled up in tribally face-painted red and black, the school colors. In a furry hooded winter coat, the blushed, scrawny Freddie looked like cotton candy. From under the coat, part of his straight brown hair fell in his eyes. He shot me a shaka. "What up, D?" Then he made an idiotic face like he was cool. "Nice shaka, dude. Did your small ass go surfing in the toilet this morning?" "There's nothing going on, man. Absolutely nothing." "I think we're going to win this year, don't you?" He laughed, and we headed out to the game to cheer on the team, even though there wasn't anything to cheer for. We were the weakest and smallest team in the conference. Our homecoming rival blasted through our ragtag bunch of maybe they should have played soccer contestants and left them for the overworked janitorial staff to clean up. The homecoming game, like every other game, wasn't much of a contest. We hadn't beaten our rivals in more than 20 years. We lost 45-3. As in every game that season, the golf team rooted from the opposite team's bleachers. Luckily, our field goal kicker, Jim Launchar's day job was playing soccer. As the team's only asset, he helped save a little bit of face. Nothing felt worse than losing our homecoming game every year, but that year it didn't seem to faze football fanatic Freddie. The primetime feel of the bright lights and the shiny helmets impressed him, but he insisted that he could never play the game because of his inability to concentrate. I'm sure Freddie's setback had nothing to do with the fact that the kid stood 5'6" on his tiptoes and weighed $120. I'd known Freddie almost my entire life. We grew up directly across the street from each other. He was rich, at least by our town standards. His father, Buck Brubaker, had made some sound investments years before the mill closed, and his mother, Trudy, came from old money. The youngest of the four Brubaker boys, Billy, Timmy, Tommy, and Freddie consecutively, he wasn't the brightest kid I knew. He spent much of his early life juiced up on Ritalin to control his outbursts of hyperactivity. Also plagued with ADD, he spent his school time in those special classes. Still, all of his birthright setbacks never stunted his optimism. As my closest friend, Freddie always spotted me when I was low on cash. I wasn't making much money cleaning up at the local bookstore. The money aside, I loved him like a brother. As small and silly as he was, Freddie always stood up for me in any situation. "Hey man, you're not going to believe the news I got today." We jumped into his overly lifted Jeep CJ7. He popped the clutch to take off and kicked in his theme song, Stigmata by Ministry. He raised his hand for a high five. "I got in the state early admission. I'm out of here, kid." It looked like Freddie was to be the first to escape. I changed the subject. "Don't worry about me. I should be fine working at a toll booth in the Bay Bridge. Maybe I'll hook you up sometime." He reached into his center console and he made a real face. It was one of pride. His little eyes blinked and his perfect teeth sparkled. "Look what my old man got me. He opened the letter before I got home from school today." Like pulling a sword from a stone, he flipped the object out of his pocket and shined it off the interior lights of his Jeep. Freddie showed me the one gift from his hard-ass father that wasn't a token of wealth, at least to Freddie. It was a Mont Blanc pen. He didn't care about the price. Maybe he didn't realize it was worth more than I made in a month. He just cared about what the pen, with his name engraved on it, symbolized. I wanted to grab it from him and throw it out of the plastic windows of the Jeep. "Jesus, Freddie," I thought. "It's fucking freezing out. Would it kill you to put a hardtop on your truck?" Freddie had been pinned as an underachiever to dunce by ignorant teachers most of his life, so the gift truly reflected his rising above expectations. To me, he'd just gotten lucky. His dad probably bought Freddie's way into state. Dude, this pen can read on anything, he began. And according to this little manual, it's indestructible. He complimented his ridiculous sports fan outfit by placing his trophy in his front shirt pocket. And then I said the unthinkable. Oh, so you can read, Freddie. I don't really know why I said it. Just kind of fired it out of spite, and out of jealousy. He downshifted the Jeep and cut off another car. Then he lifted his ass and lofted a fart my way. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I haven't seen an acceptance letter from you yet, dumb fuck. He gripped onto the pen. Realizing I'd been an ass, I tried to salvage the conversation, as well as our friendship. No, man, I didn't mean to say that. Shit. God, Freddie, your ass reeks. I blew the gas back at him with my gloves and got back to the apology. I just want to get out of here, man. I hate this place. I'm starting to hate myself for being here. He didn't answer, so I kept talking. Life doesn't revolve around an old abandoned paper mill. The desperate assholes in this town, they really believe it's going to reopen. I only write on paper. I don't give a fuck where it comes from. Whoa, fair enough, dickhead. Don't worry, D. Your letter will come. He gave me a shadow boxer duck and punch and blew through a red light. I looked away from him, back out the window at the dead town. Thanks. I'm an ass. Where are we going anyway? I don't know. A few football players are having a party. It's probably to honor Longshire for putting some numbers on the board. That was Freddie's way of dressing up shit with a cherry, a skill he had mastered. Like how he really didn't see himself as a slow learner. He saw the teachers as moving too fast. Hey man, what's up with Laurie's stepdad and the Christmas lights? At first I didn't want to discuss it because of my conversation with Rick Conroy earlier that day. I didn't see Laurie at the game. I guess she had learned to accept losing. Freddie didn't know that though, and took my silence as an invitation to keep talking. Check it, it's the middle of fucking October, and he's already building a shrine to the baby Jesus. First one to get them up every year, the last one to take him down. As we drove by Laurie's house, I looked out the plastic Jeep window, now icing up, and saw Rick Conroy whistling away and lacing the house with bright flashing lights. The guy couldn't have been happier. After the paper mill closed, the locals did anything they could to raise their spirits and keep themselves busy. All the Christmas cheer in the world didn't justify the shitty things he said about my friend Laurie. Fuck if I know, I said at last. Laurie is kind of a strange family. A little messed up. I knew her well, but I didn't have a clue to the motivation behind her stepfather's holiday excitement. You're telling me, when was the last time that twig had a burger? She needs to get with it, he laughed. Maybe she fasts all year and feasts on Christmas. Fuck off, Freddie. I think there's more to it than that. I knew Laurie had eating problems, and I didn't think it was any of Freddie's business. It's gotten into you tonight, he said. Shit, the girl gives you the Heisman one night when you try and tag her and it's my fault? You're the one being a dick. I squirted a gleek of spit in his eye. I never tried to tag her, Freddie. She's a good friend of mine and I'm worried about her, man. You used to be friends with her too. Freddie got pissy over the summer whenever I decided to spend nights kicking it with Laurie. He felt I had some deep love for her. I always kind of thought that he liked her. After driving around for nearly an hour, Freddie and I ended up parking at McDonald's, the usual meeting place for all of the anxious seniors looking for the locale of the night's festivities. Hey Freddie, you little fucking bitch, yelled Longshire. I heard about state. You out of here, boy! Nice field goal, Launch. Maybe I can talk to the state football coach. He nudged the kicking champ in the ribs. Longshire buffed his knuckles on his jersey. Football? I want to play soccer. They both shared a laugh. As much as Longshire joked, his part-time football career paid fairly well. An entourage of starstruck girls surrounded the football hero. If I hadn't known any better, I'd sworn that Longshire had just won the Super Bowl and signed a 7-figure commercial deal with McDonald's. I knew his parents could never afford to send him to college. As far as his grades were concerned, maybe it was a good night for him to be the man. Hey boys, Dodge is having a jammy at his house. Parents are gone, 2 kegs. Pick your poison. Sounds good, man, I said as we headed out of the parking lot. We'll catch you there. Both Freddie and I anticipated a messy night. Freddie pursed his lips. Hey man, I didn't get anything to eat before the game. Can we stop at the donut shop over here and pick up a snack? I don't want to get too fucking wasted. I looked at Freddie and couldn't think of anything worse than donuts and beer for a hyperactive kid having the most exciting night of his life. But I just shrugged. You're driving. We pulled up in front of the donut shop and I kept thinking about the horrible thing I'd said to him. I hoped he had forgiven me. You want to come in, D? Maybe you can get something. Yeah, that's cool. I'd come to terms with the fact that I would be babysitting a drunken maniac that night. It didn't bother me. I owed it to him. On our way into Al's Donuts, we noticed an unfamiliar aggro kid ranting nervously at passersby and screaming into a payphone. He had a bushy, home-sculpted mohawk that he pulled into a ponytail, kind of haircut we called the Bolt, a cheap leather jacket, and sweat beading up in his Cro-Magnon brow. The guy's face looked more like it was covered in scales than skin. We passed him. He gave us a once-over and remained fully tuned into his conversation. I'd never seen this kid before, so I assumed he was passing through, probably picking up a package from one of the unemployed town folks striving to make ends meet. Judging from his sunken black eyes and beyond pasty skin, the only place he would qualify as a familiar face was at a cockfight in Kentucky. Take note, young Freddie, I said as the glass door closed behind us. Butane is not a proper inhalant when mixed with crank. You think? That kid needs booger sugar as much as I do right now. He laughed and shuffled through his products as we entered Al's to a ringing, distorted bell. Hey D, order me a Bear Claw, honey glaze, and a couple of those gross old ones to throw at people at Dodger's house. I left my dinero in the car. Cool, I'll be here, I said as he turned around and headed back out. Al's wasn't any different than any other brightly lit donut shop in town. It seemed like a great place for the homeless people to sit and sip away in a small cup of coffee for a few hours to stay warm. Hey Barry, what's up? The donut man of the night was our football team's ex-star running back Barry Den. I pointed to the framed picture behind him. Employee of the month, huh? The picture was of Barry in his Al's uniform smiling. What up, D? He returned. Did my boys sing Redemption tonight? Funny thing about Barry was that after his junior year, he began speaking like a Rastafarian. He told everyone he was born in Jamaica and moved to America at a young age. If you didn't know any better, you'd swear he was the long-lost descendant of Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and Jah himself. As a matter of fact, he always wore a ring that was rumored to have belonged to Marcus Garvey, father of black nationalism. I suspected his birth records would tell a different story, and the whole charade was just an excuse to smoke weed. Besides, I knew Barry before he grew his high-top fade into dreadlocks and traded his dookie chain for a leather necklace with a red, yellow, and green African medallion. Take a guess who won, Barry. I didn't think so. I saw you at that old swamp again today. Why do you go there? It smells. The feeling of my hidden place being exposed crawled around on my tongue. I don't know. It's away from this shit. The smell there seems better than the smell of the rest of this dead fucking city. Gotcha. Any partying going on later? Barry was the one great hope our football team ever had of winning a homecoming game. However, after one too many articles in the local newspaper about the great Barry Den, he dropped out after his junior year and tried to go pro. Didn't work out the way he expected. After that, he took some night classes and successfully got his GED. Unlike most ex-sports heroes who still lusted for the glory years, he tried not to talk about the past. I guess the rest was donut history. Yeah, Dodge and those clowns are having a party. Can you grab me a Bear Claw, a honey glazed, and a couple of those old heinous ones? Is done. He flicked open a bag and masterfully juggled the donuts into a bag. And then something caught his attention. AD, looks like Freddy's having a trouble with that ragamuffin. I'd forgotten about the living dead lingering outside, so at first I didn't register Barry's comment. Nonetheless, before I could turn around, the bell signaled that Freddy was already on his way back in. As usual, he was all smiles. What was that all about? I asked. That freak just wanted to borrow my pen and write down a number. Freddy didn't even seem to think twice about lending out his trophy. Where is it now? He's bringing it back when he's finished. He better. Before I dug into Freddy about lending out the pen, the bell chimed, and the mystery man plunged through the door. He picked at the scabs on his face, and his right eye twitched like someone had sprayed him with a sandblaster. His eyes fixated on a neon sign behind Barry. Hey man, can I buy this pen from you? No, it was a gift. Why don't you fuck off down the street to Rite Aid and buy one? Because I need to copy down this information now. You got any paper? Once again, Freddy fumbled through his pockets. The only thing he had was the acceptance letter to state. Funny how no one has a piece of paper when they really needed one. Nope, Freddy answered, a little perturbed. Just write it down in your hand. That pen writes on anything. Maybe if you wash your hands first, you'll be able to read it later. He was heating up. His red and black face paint ran together as he ripped down the fuzzy hood in his coat. Frenzied, the neurotic kid yelled and spun around. God damn it! He streamed his long yellow fingernails to his bolt and headed back to the phone. The sick bell chimed. Freddy cooled down a little bit. Maybe we should invite that psycho to Dodger's house. Looks like he could use a beer. Fuck that. Let's take him there and give him a blanket party. A blanket party was our way of letting an asshole know that he stepped out of line. Usually performed as a joke, or homage to the infamous code reds of the military. We pulled a blanket over some sucker's head and beat the shit out of him until he begged for mercy. Nice, huh? Oh, relax, D. What's happening, Barry? Not much, Freddy. You had them donuts. Once again, the scumbag plowed into the shop. The bell didn't work. Don't be a dick, dude. I need this pen. I'll give you $20 for it. One of his face pickings started to bleed. Freddy showed the early signs of the hyperactive kid who had once lit himself on fire and jumped into the lake as a joke. Look. Fuck. Just write down your info and give it back. The pleather-clad Hesher kicked the door open and returned to the phone. In an attempt to alleviate stress, I stepped up to the counter in front of Freddy. I got it, Fred. I owe you something for being a dick earlier. I reached across the counter and gave Barry my money. 3 gunshots rang out behind me. They shook my teeth and burnt my gums. Terror thrusted up through my veins. My balls shriveled into my chest, and my dick got wet. I jumped behind the counter with Barry, who had already taken cover. I didn't hear Freddy cry out, so I figured he had taken cover with us as well. Barry's Employee of the Month picture fell, and the glass smashed on my head. 2 seconds later, the reluctant bell rang, and the gunman squealed out of the parking lot. With my eyes closed, I propped myself up slowly. Barry hunkered down, shivering in shock. I shook so hard that the cheap imitation glass donut case rattled and the cakes inside fell out their shells. With one eye, I looked up to the display case, peering beyond the mixed pile of donuts. I saw the twitching remains of college student Freddy Brubaker. It was difficult to tell where his blood stopped and his smeared makeup began. It was even harder to tell who he was. I lost control of my breathing. I looked down at my lifelong mangled friend, the first of my allies to escape from the town, and saw his Mont Blanc pen gripped in his hand. Engraved on the base were the words, "You did it. Love, Dad." He shivered. His arms fluttered, and his last living squirt of blood spat all over the front of the counter. I jumped over Barry. He fired up a joint. "Breathe, Freddy!" "Breathe, goddammit, breathe!" is all I managed to get out. My heart pounded and my palms were soaked with sweat. I tried to use the napkins to make the bleeding stop, and I tried to plug up the 3 holes with my fingers like Freddy's chest was a bowling ball. "Fucker! God damn it! Fucker!" I screamed at myself. With that last look, I blacked out. A week later, I crossed the street to the Brubaker's house. Buck, Freddy's father, gave me the pen saying I should have it. At first, I was reluctant to take it, but he insisted that it belonged to me. He couldn't bear the sight of this last trophy, all that remained of his youngest son. In an attempt to console him, I told Buck that the killer didn't have any idea of the pen's value. "The bastard didn't even have the balls to face his crime," Buck sniffed. His lips quivered, and his voice cracked. After the killer bailed from Al's, he headed down the highway where the local cops pursued him. While driving toward the Bay Bridge, his only escape route, the only escape route, he crammed his gun into his face, fired it, and swerved off the road. Coward. The entire Hell Night didn't faze the cops of Kudzu Town, however. Freddy was just another kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. Since the rest of the apathetic assholes of the town were too busy fucking off, not many people seemed to care that Freddy was killed. Lori cared, though, and she called me. "Dee, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch," she said weakly. "It's okay, Lori. Where have you been?" "I've been busy." "Do you miss him?" I tugged on my ear and bunched up my face so I wouldn't break down. "I haven't really had time to think about it." "You can't ignore it, Dee. You loved him." "I love you, too." "Dee," she began. I hung up the phone. That night I went to Nazareth to bury Freddy's trophy at the foundation. I didn't think I'd ever be able to write with that pen. Much to my chagrin, some neighborhood kids had constructed a rope swing by hammering 2 railroad spikes into the tree's hands, securing a long nylon rope connected to an old tire. Furious, I ripped down the apparatus, tearing the nails from the limbs of the tree. Then I hoisted the plaything into the sewer. The fiery rage pumping through my arms froze when I realized what I had done. I weakened the appendages. Sap gushed out. The limbs dangled like ornaments on a pathetic Christmas tree. After my initial shock, though, it didn't upset me. Without looking again, I dug a hole at the base and buried Freddy's trophy. Then I sat down with my back to Nazareth, and I wrote. 3. Winter added another ring to Nazareth's long life. In that season, I spent the day home from school, sick, so I could crank out a couple of poems that were due for my creative writing class. I knew that they wouldn't take me that long to complete, and I wanted to leave high school with a bang, making my presence as a writer remembered. How heroic of me. I felt that nothing made people listen like the written word. My love for reading and writing began when my mother forced me to read a bunch of books every summer. When the post-school season began, she would take me to the local bookstore where I picked out half, usually something from C.S. Lewis or Robert Newton Peck, and she picked out the other half, usually classics. As I got older, each summer would be stacked with more and more classics until the kids' books were ignored altogether. Reading became an easy outlet for me to disassociate myself with my fear of dying. I let these authors guide my life, like they did their characters. As far as competing with other students, I had no worries. What did I have to compete with? I wasn't afraid of the theater kids and their obsession with the bored rebellion of Holden Caulfield. I scoffed at the stoners and their gonzo-esque carbon copies of Hunter S. Thompson. I turned up my nose at the countless caustic attempts at metaphorically mutating Roses Are Red by paying tribute to Jimi Hendrix or John Lennon. I wanted to tell something bold, something true. Oddly enough, when I was young, I always dreamed of writing horror stories. The new poem, however, couldn't be horror or fantasy. It had to be something real. After pacing in an unconstructive way around Nazareth, I concluded that every other kid in the class was going to sum up the closing of the paper mill and how it had taken a toll on our town. I hadn't taken the time to deal with Freddy's death, so I decided to leave that topic to one of the many girls in the class who fancied themselves his widow. I diverted my attention elsewhere. Lori Conroy's misery and my short confrontation with her stepfather at Auto RX were the first things that came to mind. Lori had always been a close friend, but she kept secrets from me. I knew she suffered from anorexia and it consumed her. One time when I went out to get frozen yogurt with her, she threw a fit at the employee who refused to measure out the non-packed yogurt into exactly 10 ounces. She was obsessed, and all the warning signs were there. A couple of my friends and I used to make fun of her mustache and call her Hitler. Whenever she walked by, we stood attention and saluted her, our arms into the air, exclaiming, "Heil!" One day she took me aside in tears, explaining that because of her affliction, her body produced a soft, thin layer of hair everywhere on her body. Except for the hair on her head, of course, which had already begun to thin. All of her friends ignored her cry for help, relying on the societal debate concerning high school females and their infatuation with supermodels. Another time, she admitted to me that she had to be rehydrated and medicated regularly by an IV. No one else knew, myself included. We were a typical bunch of self-absorbed high school assholes. I felt I owed her something. I didn't want to expose her shit to my teachers or make her uncomfortable around my friends, but I did want to let her know that I cared. I worked all that day under the weakened arms of Nazareth. The trunk supported my back and kept me attentive to the task I outlined. However, the stench of the bog, combined with the stale beer, made me gag every couple minutes. I wrote poem after poem and just balled up the shitty ones and chucked them into the water. Sure, a plea for forgiveness drove my poetry, but the results painted a picture of how I saw Lori. At dusk, I finally produced a finished product that satisfied me. I read the poem to myself over and over. It was indeed poetic, everything I hoped it would be. Lori's maze always led back to the beginning. I searched what I knew about her for an answer to her perpetuated self-destruction. I found nothing. To be honest, I thought it was a little selfish for someone to refuse food. IV. It would seem as if Lori is locked in the cold, ignoring demise, struggling for her life. Help me get out, her gentle eyes cry, a pile of bones bearing regret underlies. Coaxing reflections beyond, and her creatures within. Eating is forgotten, beauty under her knife. She will never know where and when death will strike. Every calorie skipped, his sickle delights. Those who are forced to mature when their parents divide can weep all they want, their tears best left unsaid. She reached for support with her skeletal wrists. Love for all others, to herself love went missed. If Lori is my teacher, why am I alone? Am I also confined to her spidery web? As I watch Lori bowing to her personal harm, I notice a bracelet, an IV in her arm. Excited about my poem, I went home, checked the mail, and, disappointed again, called Lori to ask her to meet me at the McDonald's parking lot. She agreed. "You can't bring this to class," she screamed as she read the words. Her lips were bleeding. "You'll totally single me out." "Lori, I just wanted to." "Fuck you!" She pulled out a cigarette, probably the first of her second or third pack of the day, from behind her ear. In one swift circular motion, she pulled her trademark Zippo out of her pocket, lit the cigarette, and returned the lighter to its home. She must have practiced that move so many times to get it right. I watched in admiration as she filled my car with a huge puff of smoke. "What? You want to tell everyone how fucked up I am?" "You don't understand, D." She continued to look at my poem as tears poured past the dark circle around her eyes and down her cheeks. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Not a word. Finally, she took a deep breath. "He fucks me, D." I searched through my mind and came upon a frightening realization. He fucks me all the time. Once she found the courage to start, she didn't want to stop. When my mom goes out, even when she just goes to the store to pick up a couple of things, he rapes me. He beats me like his bitch and calls me his dead wife's name. "Angie, Angie, you whore, Angie!" all over the house. He won't stop. Smoke clouded the car. It was too cold outside to roll down the windows. I touched her shoulder. Unable to comfort her, I retracted my hand immediately. Lori's lip curled up as she snarled at my touch. Rick Conroy, stringing up his Christmas lights, whistling "Jesus Loves Me." It all made sense. I finally understood how such a beautiful girl with everything going for her would want to reinvent herself as something unappealing and skeletal. She looked horrible. Her beautiful thick hair had become thinned and patched, like the rodent carcasses that I sent swimming weekly down at the bog. How come you never told anybody? Would you tell anybody? My mom? She's always pissed drunk. She ignores what she may or may not know. She doesn't give a fuck. She took a huge breath, fighting down her tears. She's so fucking stupid that she doesn't notice the ant traps that I have surrounding my bed. Rick uses greasy towels from the shop as nut rags and throws them under my bed when he's finished fucking me. I'm not touching that shit. They're all covered in ants. Lori is your friend. I gotta tell someone. Jesus Christ, you should have told someone. Someone other than me. I didn't want to be the sole protector of her secret, but her black eyes pleaded with me. No way. I don't want to be the freak. I know what people say. I hear those tweet cunts that pretend to be my friends say they want to help, when they secretly wish they were as thin as me. I see how you all make jokes about me. She pulled up the arm of her sweater and revealed the lifeless bone of a limb. You aren't a freak, Lori. You just need some help. It's not that easy. You don't know, Dee. Please keep it to yourself. If I found out you told anyone, I'll kill you. You hear me? Reluctantly, I nodded. I'm getting out of here. I'm gonna go stay with my sister until summer, and I'll find out next week whether or not I got an estate. My mom has the money tucked away from when my grandfather died. My grades are pretty solid. At least they were until this year. She flicked her cigarette out the window and lit up another one. Same motion, same precision. I was surprised that she could lift the lighter. You have to quit. Now. All I could do was offer simple solutions to her terror. Back then, I didn't realize that all she saw was her stepfather's cock staring back at her from the mirror. I couldn't feel her pain. She opened her eyes wide. Keep your mouth shut, Dee. You aren't God. She pulled deep on her cigarette. Shit, asshole. I think one of my contacts fell out. Okay, Lori. I promise. Thanks. She continued to look at the poem and cry. Can I keep this? I'll give you my lighter. From her pocket, she pulled out her precious Zippo, this time slowly. Her fingernails were yellow and frail. It was an offering for secrecy. I shooed it away, but she insisted. Take it. I have to quit smoking. It's killing me. We both laughed as we made an exchange. I heard her bones creak as she left the car carefully. She poked her head in and blew me a smoke-scented kiss. She followed her token of love by performing this crazy skeleton dance. She bounced around aimlessly, flapping her grossly thin body around like an uncontrollable marionette. It was her way of letting me know everything was going to be okay. The next day, I ended up turning in an obvious poem about the closing of the paper mill and how it would have affected Mark Twain. Apparently, my teacher didn't agree with my views on obscure literary references focusing on Twain and his hatred for James Fenimore Cooper's fraudulent romantic writing style. I thought it was funny. But my teacher fancies herself quite a deer slayer when it comes to grading. I got a C. At least Lori's secret was safe. A few weeks later, Lori's friend Kelly told me that Lori had been taken to the hospital after collapsing in her physics class. According to the teacher, she was giving a speech and, in mid-sentence, toppled over and nailed her head. The teacher blamed exhaustion, but I knew better. Lori was in trouble. After school, I went down to the local hospital to see if everything was okay. The hospital sickened me. I'm sure that the dirty floors and donation cans next to the ashtrays were common practice in most non-third world hospitals. Our town, and everything in it, was third world. It was just a shithole. If you were born there, you were born into shit. Most likely, judging from the upkeep of the hospital, you'd die in shit too. You okay? I asked, as I yanked open the curtain that sheltered her from the molester. Yeah, I'll be all right. I just got dizzy and hit the ground. At the risk of sounding like a typical eating disorder bully, I nudged at her. Then why do you have an IV in your arm, Lori? You need to fucking eat. Fuck you, Dee. This has nothing to do with that. I think I drank too much this weekend at Dodge's house. I'm still a little dehydrated. I grabbed a 3.5-legged stool over to her bedside. Listen, we both know that's fucking bullshit. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. After her reaction to the poem, I didn't want anyone to know about her condition. Seeing her, pale beyond belief, shriveled up with an intravenous bag filling her with water, I thought my safest bet would be to keep quiet than lose a friend. I didn't want her to keep suffering, though. I love you, Dee. I have your poem hidden in the glove compartment of my car. If I ever feel unloved, I read it. How's that lighter? Great, except for the fact that I don't smoke. You will. She lit up a cigarette with a match off her bedpost. "Miss, you can't smoke in here," a nurse walking by yelled. "Fuck you, bitch," Lori grunted. The phone rang around 2 a.m. in the morning. My mom answered it and rushed into my room. "Honey, Lonchar's on the phone. He says it's important." Great, I thought. Dodge must be having another one of his epic all-nighters. "Where were you tonight?" I guess she heard me sneezing. I'm allergic to alcohol. Out. I ventured through the desert of writing paper all over my floor and picked up the phone. "What do you want, Launch?" "I'm fucking sleeping," I grumbled, and I wiped snot from my eyes. "Dude, Lori jumped off the Bay Bridge. They found her car parked outside with the note. They haven't found her yet." I acted surprised. "What?" "She may be alive. I'm going to go up there and search around." "What did the note say, Lonchar?" "It was a letter from State, refusing her admission and something else." Shit. The fucking poem. The phone dropped from my hand and I walked away. Faintly, I heard Lonchar yelling, D, are you there? D! Refused. No way out. Lori knew she was trapped. I walked into my room and put on my clothes. My mom peeked at the door. "Honey, what did he want? Did something happen? Did you do something?" "Don't worry about it, Mom. I'll be back in a little while." I probably should have told her something, but I had another agenda. I picked up Lori's Zippo from my bedstand and headed out. Voices in my head reminded me of my recent tragedy. I didn't wait for them to search for Lori. I didn't have to. I already knew. When I went to Nazareth to bury Lori's letter, I saw him in a completely different light. The darkness may have been deceiving, but that night he didn't look as strong. He'd seemed weathered, beaten down, and tired. He didn't reflect any tangible form other than a big pile of kudzu. I fell to my knees and dug directly next to the burial location of Freddy's pen. The smell of death in the town made me gag, but I sucked the vomit back down and swallowed. Something I'd become accustomed to over the years in kudzu captivity. Never looking down, I dropped Lori's flame into the hole and covered it up. The authorities eventually found her decayed body a couple of days later. It washed up on the banks of the bay. I'm sure that even in her decomposed state, she was still as beautiful as she had always been. As much as I wished it never happened, I knew deep down that she didn't see any other way out. I kept the secret. At that time, I wanted her beauty to live on forever, untarnished. Her problem wouldn't have been solved by an extra 2 ounces of yogurt. 4. I was stretching out my knotted back when I peered into the mailbox one unexpected spring day. Unlike the previous few months, during which I opened the box daily only to be showered with an avalanche of delinquent bills my parents tried to ignore, that day I found a sole letter. I knew what it was. I bit my lip, pulled it out, and my stomach howled. I felt my eyes welling up, and premonitions of working the toll booth on the Bay Bridge stabbed me in the head. As Lori and Freddy's murderer proved, the bridge was the only way out. The envelope felt thin. Not a good sign. I smelled it. It smelled like the bog. Negative thoughts shot through my mind. Why would I, a kid from some shitty little town, beat out every other aspiring writer to get a scholarship to Palmbrook University? The letter was for me. It was either a ticket to paradise or a sentence to death. Luckily, my parents were gone. They wouldn't have to see my disappointment as I unfolded the letter. More thoughts raced through my mind. Well, I could always go to community college and raise my grades. I would then hear my personal devil's advocate answer. This isn't about grades. It's your only chance. Fuck that. If I had to walk across the fucking evil bridge, I was going to get out of that town no matter what. I hated it that fucking much. I closed the mailbox and headed up my walkway. "So, D," the mailman I had pestered the entire year asked, "what's the word?" I said nothing and slammed the door behind me. "Don't shoot the messenger," he yelled after me. I walked up to my room and sat down on my messy bed, playing with the letter, holding it up to the light, bending it for contents. I expected nothing but the worst. Was it any better than the dying town where I lived? Where exactly was I going? What did I expect to do with my life? I thought about Freddie Brubaker and Laurie Conroy for the first time since they passed. Is our world so fucked up and deranged? What did they have to look forward to? I yelled at myself. What could they change? Murderers get out because of their social status. Good people are killed for saying what they want. What was so good about the world anyway? Everything that I looked forward to, everything that I had ever wanted, was on that one piece of paper. Like many other times, like the night Freddie was killed, I needed a piece of paper. It would surely fix things. I tore open the envelope. There was a single piece of cheap paper stock inside, nicely folded, something I wouldn't have noticed, except I always envisioned my college acceptance letter printed on thick paper, laced with gold and ripe for framing. I unfolded the first flap. What if I didn't fit in? What if paradise was a scam? What if I couldn't cut it as a writer? I unfolded the second flap, revealing the contents of my life. It was only about 3 paragraphs in length, fairly unimpressive for the foretelling of my future. I read, "Assholes! They spelled my name wrong." Well, in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't important. So I read the first line. "Congratulations, you've been accepted on scholarship to attend Palmbrook University. Paradise found." Fuck, I did it. I actually fucking did something. When my parents arrived home that evening, I proudly showed them the letter. They both went to college. As a matter of fact, they both went to better colleges than the one I'd gotten into. However, the military brainwash of my father's academy school and the Lutheran teaching of my mother's Midwestern school didn't appeal to me. I wanted to write, and I needed to get out. "Good job, son, you did it," my father, who I called the General, said, extending his hand for a firm shake. He brushed his dark Polak hair over his protruding forehead caused by years of boxing and football, and smiled. "I don't know, honey. Are you sure you want to leave?" my mother pleaded. My mom tried to hug me like I was a cub. She was no bear. Always a small woman, her dyed blonde hair showed roots, the result of unpaid bills. Her green eyes watered as she wiped calluses across my face. Her rich parents would have been ashamed by what Kudzu Town had done to her. I handed my father the letter. "Assholes! They spelled our name wrong," he muttered. After a good dinner, I took my letter off the fridge. My mom, still a little shaken up that I was leaving home, took her eyes from the stove. "Are you going to go show it to your friends?" Something like that. I had one last sacrifice to offer Nazareth. One last duty. 5. Sitting on the stump of the drained Nazareth, I counted the days before my triumphant escape. The tree, which once stood proud, an enigma in our town, had been reduced to just a pew, surrounded by a lump of torn kudzu and leftover bark. Unbeknownst to me, someone had leveled the entire area sometime over the previous couple of months. Even the smaller disciples across the bog had been mowed down. It was also really nice of the workmen to knock down a power line and add to the smell of the area by electrocuting a few living creatures that managed to stick it out and survive the swamp. When you're forced to grow up, security blankets, crutches, idols, and even religions fade away, and you lose interest. Why did I give my faith to something based solely on its test of time and its importance to my past? My dependency on God disappeared, becoming nothing more than a lesson. I didn't think that spending any more time there would have made any difference. It wouldn't bring Freddie or Laurie back. I picked up a blackened raccoon by the tail and tossed it into the big green dumpster in the middle of the stream. I was a realist, not a dreamer. I was sure that they would build a strip mall or something equally worthless, the type of place no one in Kudzu Town could afford to frequent. It didn't matter. The entire town was fucking scatter, and no matter how they dressed it up, scatter is all that it would ever fucking be. All we were, all of us, were a bunch of dead animals. Bending over, I lunged my index finger down my throat and vomited. It didn't seem strange at the time. I was sickened by everything that happened during the school year. My agony and hatred, coupled by the smell of my world, made it easy. I didn't retract and swallow the barf back down. I enjoyed letting it go. I wiped some mucus off my pants. I felt relieved. I felt cleansed. Clearing away the piles of Nazareth, I dug up Freddie's trophy pen and Laurie's precious lighter. I wanted to cry. It was all senseless. What could I have done to prevent their deaths? Nothing. First, I pulled out the lighter. as I envisioned Lori's one-motion trick. All I saw was her pain. It was about a lot more than escaping for her. She wanted to be loved, but not by that fucking lazy-eyed asshole Conroy. I held my acceptance letter up, and in one circular motion, torched it. They'd spelled my name wrong. I knew the general would make sure they sent another. The paper slowly burned away. The breeze broke the ends off and shat them into disgusting wastes of the bog below. The thin paper burned brightly, but eventually the flames burned uncontrollably. The letter doubled over and collapsed, singeing the skin of my thumb, but the stomach bile that remained in my index finger controlled it. I held up Freddy's trophy. Sure enough, just like he said, it proved to indeed be indestructible. I read the inscription aloud to the fallen Nazareth. You did it. Love, Dad. It was roughly the same thing my father said to me. Sure, the general wanted me to go to some military school, but he was proud of me, just as much as old Buck Brewbreaker was of Freddy. I tried to shut out that fateful night for the rest of my life, but certain elements always flashed by. Freddy masked behind his ridiculous face makeup. Lonchar the hero, Barry the dreamer, the speed freak coward, and me, the jealous asshole. I tried as hard as I could to plug up Freddy's bullet wounds. I tried so hard, but the blood kept pouring out. The sight of Freddy's shaking body haunted me, but I shut it out as well. He just lay there, begging for a minute, a second, a moment, and twitched. As his leg quivered, the blood from his wounds pumped out, as if his legs were a death machine, pushing him to an end as quickly as possible. Fumbling through my pockets, I searched for a piece of paper to write on. Just like Freddy at Al Donuts, though, I didn't have any. If only he had a piece of paper. Anything for that freak to write down whatever information had been so fucking important. Why is it that every time someone needs a piece of paper, they can't find one? But of course, I knew the answer to that one. The paper mill closed down. I stomped around like a lunatic, crushing the worthless remains of Nazareth. Frantic, I threw Lori's later into the bog. I shredded pieces of the vine. I kicked at the stump and smashed scraps of bark. I fucking hate you! I yelled at the stump. I hate you so fucking much! I blacked out for a second. Time took a toll on the town, and I was just another animal. I might have felt release, but I would always be a prisoner. My arms and legs were ripped apart by limbs and bark. I was bleeding all over myself, and I sucked snot into my mouth to get it off my face. I vomited again. I jumped to my feet, unleashed. I still wasn't free. My head banged against the cage that held me from my escape. I would never be free. And just as I lifted my arm to throw the Mont Blanc, that terrible fucking pen, a memory surged through my head. Dude, this pen can write on anything. I stopped and slowly picked up a piece of bark from one of Nazareth's two reaching limbs. I wrote the truth. My truth. I paid my last respects to the tree. For once it proved useful. The bog, the paper mill, the tree, they weren't my hiding places anymore, nor were they going to be my burial ground, or the burial ground of my friends. Darkness surrounded the swamp, so I fished Lori's lighter out of the smelly pissing hole, put the piece of bark under my arm, proudly placed Freddy's pen in my front pocket, and I headed home. For the second time that year, I observed the dilapidated homes, the beaten-up cars abandoned in the streets, the rummage growing in yards. It was all so wrong. After an hour of disgust, I reached my school, most likely the cleanest high school in the country. Our good-natured principal hired an overabundant amount of out-of-work custodians when the mill closed. I walked by the football field and saw Lonchart kicking field goals. Since Freddy's death, Lonch stayed late after soccer practice to warm up for next year's football season. Good job, D, he yelled across the field when he saw me. I heard the news from your mom when I called to tell you about the shindig tonight at Dodger's Pad. A real kick-ass party. Honeys everywhere. Pick your poison. You up? I wasn't very close to him, but at the same time I could tell he'd been crying. His voice cracked as he screamed. I'm sure he cried every night. A lot of us did. Yeah, I'll be there. I got some shit to take care of first. Lonchart booted a 40-yard field goal. It was all in vain. He never scored another Showtime point again, at least not in high school. After he lifted his arms to signal 3 points, he dropped to his knees. I wanted to comfort him, but I was a bloody mess and I was out of words. He got up from his knees, placed another ball on the tee, and wiped sweat and tears off his forehead. Kind of a fucked up year, huh? Yeah, kind of a very fucked up year. I turned around. Oh, your mom told me to tell you to call if I ran into you. Use the phone over by the locker room, it's free. Thanks, man. I headed toward the locker room, listening to his grunts and groans. Provided he got that soccer player nonsense out of his head, Launch was going to make it out of here. I picked up the phone and started dialing my house. I hesitated, and just as easily as I had picked up the receiver, I hung it up. I fell into the wall in front of me. The bricks crumbled as dust blinded me. That time, at last, I cried. Some things are best left unsaid. Some things aren't. I dialed a different number. It was strange how everything came together. After I walked by the high school, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. To be sure I wasn't dreaming, I looked down at my watch. Sure enough, April 16th, nowhere near Christmas. Shocked, I dropped everything I was holding, and there he was, Rick Conroy, whistling away, tearing down the lights that still covered his house like an overgrowth of kudzu. After collecting my memories, I walked up to the ladder and shook the base. Nice night, huh, Mr. Conroy? What? Ah, you scare me. He looked up at the sky. It's all right. I can feel something coming in from the west, though. He readjusted his hat, snorted, and spat onto the ground. All I did was stare at him. I stared directly into his aimless, lazy eye. I wanted to gouge it out with Freddy's pen. You got a fucking problem, son? What are you looking at? I woke myself from the death stare and got myself together. I just think it's brilliant how you leave your Christmas lights up practically all year round. It's almost like you want to constantly bring joy to this town. Yeah. He scratched his nose, checking to see if he had a booger on his face that would warrant my stare. Something like that. He shook his head, confused. I placed a piece of bark at the bottom of the ladder and walked away. Well, here. I've decided to bring joy to this town as well. I hope you get what you deserve, motherfucker. Boy, what in the hell? I heard him step down from the ladder, but I didn't turn around. I just kept walking away. Is this some kind of joke, kid? He screamed after me. Why are you all bloody? Are you on PCP? I didn't answer. Hey, I'm talking to you, you little shit! I continued to walk, and he continued to scream. What does this mean? I know you, Deese, you little fucker! He didn't run after me. He didn't understand the message I'd scrawled on Nazareth's bark. As his rants became more distant, nearly out of reach, I heard the police sirens. For once, a phone conversation had indeed paid off. Merry Christmas, rapist, I whispered, thinking of the message I carved in the bark with Freddie Brubaker's pen.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.